think that is the trees. Huh? I think that's caused by the tree.
Oh no, I was being will you eat a hot dog?
Smart.
Huh? Oh, one? Oh, yeah.
All right. Well, good morning, everyone. Welcome to today's Exploring by the Sea of Your Pants Hangout. My name is Joe Grabowski, and I'll be your host for today. In case you haven't noticed, things are a little different today. We are outside. We are live in Norfolk, Virginia at the Virginia Zoo. We have a whole day of live events planned for classrooms joining us all across North America. We're going to tour around the zoo. We're going to meet all kinds of amazing animals. We're going to meet the zookeepers and learn a lot about important conservation work. So let's get things started right away. Really excited today to be joined by Haley. Haley works with the birds at the Virginia Zoo, and our special guest today is a cassowary. So Haley, I'm going to let you take over for a little bit. Tell us a little bit about the cassowary, and then we'll go from there.
Awesome. So yes, this is Boris, our Southern Cassowary. So there are 3 different kinds of cassowaries in the world. We have single wattled cassowaries, double wattled cassowaries, and dwarf cassowaries. So the wattles are those 2 little wattly things hanging from his neck. They're a reddish, bluish. They do change color depending on the animal's mood, but typically females' wattles tend to be a little bit bigger and brighter than males. Boris is a male, so he gets his name from those double wattles. He's also known as a Southern Cassowary. So the single wattles are Northern Cassowaries, double wattles are Southern Cassowaries. Boris is about 22 years old. He is pretty small for a male. Males typically are a lot smaller than females. Boris is only about 4.5 feet tall when he's fully stretched up, whereas the females can get up to 6.5 feet tall. Boris weighs about 90 pounds, so that's pretty typical for males to be in that range, whereas some of our females that we have here can be up to 150 pounds. So there's a pretty big weight difference. So Boris's favorite food is grapes. So we're gonna just keep him over here in view for you guys by coaxing him every now and then with some grapes, rewarding him for being such a good bird. So these guys are found in Australia and New Guinea. They are the largest land mammal of Australia, or land animal, sorry, of Australia. They are the second heaviest bird, second to the ostrich. Speaking of ostrich, they are in the ratite family. So that family includes ostrich, emus, rheas, kiwis, and these guys are the second heaviest. The second tallest are emus, which are actually Boris's neighbors. So we do have 2 emus and 6 wallabies that live real close by to Boris because, we do have this fence lining keeping them separated and keeping Boris separated from us because cassowaries are deemed the most dangerous bird in the world. So there are only about 2 reported deaths of humans, but they are also the only bird that's known to be able to attack and cause bodily harm to humans. They are dangerous because of their feet. I know you may not be able to see the toenails, but they do have three toes, and the innermost toenail can reach up to 5 inches long. They can use that as a dagger to kind of impale their victims if they so need to. These guys are more defensive than offensive though, so you're likely only to encounter an angry cassowary if you're a threat to it or its offspring. Male cassowaries are pretty territorial. They have their own little territories that they protect from other males. Females will kind of wander in between. Their territories are much larger and will overlap a bunch of males. So if you are out and about in Australia or New Guinea and you see a male, stay away from them. The females usually don't care too much unless it's right before breeding season. These guys have a really interesting breeding behavior. So males and females are super solitary. They don't come into contact with each other until it's time to breed. At that point, the female will wander into a male's territory. They'll do the do, they'll copulate. She will lay her eggs between 3 and 5 and then just leave. The male is in charge of incubating the eggs. The male's in charge of raising the offspring. The female has nothing to do with the babies after she's laid the eggs. She then wanders off and finds another male to just continue on doing her thing with. Incubation is about 50 to 60 days. During that time, males can stay on the nest, on the eggs, the entire time. They don't need to get up to eat, to use the restroom, to drink. They can lose up to a third of their weight because of this, but they are incredibly dedicated parents. So 3 to 5 eggs, 50 to 60 days incubation, and then the dad will keep the babies with him for 6 to 9 months until they are more mature. They'll look different. They won't have their full wattles during this time. They reach their adult plumage once they're about 3 years old. So at that point, dad will kick them out, and they will have nothing to do with dad, find their own territories, and the whole process will keep going. So these guys, when they are defensive and territorial, they're able to run up to 30, 35 miles an hour. They're able to jump about 5 feet high, and that's where that dangerous toenail comes in, because they'll jump, and as they come down, they'll use it as a little stab. But again, they're pretty docile unless they have to be. So other attributes to this guy, so he is a part of the ratite family. With that being said, he is flightless, just like ostrich, just like emus, just like all of the members of that grouping. He does have vestigial wings, so they're wings that are kind of useless as far as flight goes. It's a little dinky wing about that big that folds kind of to the right and left of his chest. You won't be able to see it from where you're at, but they do have 6 specialized feathers that grow out of those little wings. They are quill-like, they're pretty hard, and they can use them just to kind of maneuver around the thick forest that they live in. So they also have the casque on top of their head, that big horn thing. That casque is made out of keratin. So just like what your fingernails are made out of, it's made out of the same thing. There have been a lot of debates as to what the benefit is of the casque. Some people think that it's to help them maneuver through those thick forests. Some people believe that it's to help the acoustics travel through the forest and help them communicate a lot easier. Recently, though, there have been a lot of studies that have supported it alleviating heat, so they can dissipate heat through that horn, which is pretty interesting. That was discovered, I think, in 2018. So pretty recent papers written about that. So these guys, there's not that much known about them as in comparison to other more mainstream animals. So we are learning new things every day. We do have 3 other cassowaries here at the Virginia Zoo. This is Bars. He is a pretty small little male. We have Bella, who's our 150-pound, very, very large female. She's about 6 years old. Bars is 22. We're hoping next year that we may do an introduction and maybe have them live alongside each other more so than what they are now. And then we do have Algie, a 6-year-old female, and Halliger, a 6-year-old male, who is actually one of Forrest's sons. So we're doing a lot of work to maintain the population, keep it as diverse and genetically viable as possible. These guys are vulnerable in the wild. So if we as a zoo can maintain a genetically diverse population, we can potentially help this species in the future if it comes to the point where cassowaries have to be released back into the wild. Things are happening like that with kiwis. So who knows what the future holds for these guys. We just know that we're doing our best to help that population if we need to. So these guys do lay between 3 and 5 eggs. I do have an egg to show you. So we have a fun little box of goodies. So I don't know if you need to zoom in at all, but this is a pretty standard cassowary egg. So the coloration does help them disguise and hide their eggs in the forest. Females won't build a nest or anything. They just kind of find a good spot and plop them down. In comparison, this is an emu egg. Looks more like an avocado in color. Again, the different colors just help them based on the areas and regions that they are in. It helps disguise in with the surrounding area. And this is an ostrich egg for comparison. So you can get kind of an idea of how large these eggs are. They're all very, very stiff, very, very brittle, very hardy. They can roll around. They can be accidentally stood on. and they'll be relatively okay with those wings. So these are their wing feathers. They're pretty scraggly looking, kind of weird, but they are really, really hard, made out of keratin as well, just like fingernails and hair. Another really interesting thing, I don't know if this will pop out on the camera, but their feathers are specialized. So a normal bird feather that you'd imagine would have one shaft that goes into the feather. Looks kind of like a leaf. These guys have one feather shaft that lead to two separate feathers. I do apologize for my dirty hands.
You're working hard, so.
It's a lot of work to do. So that's pretty unique to ratites, and all of their feathers are that similar two feathers coming out of one feather shaft. So these guys are mostly fruit-eating birds, although they have been known to eat pretty much anything they can put their mouths on.
I'm just noticing we're in the Australia yard right now. We have a few other little friends coming over. You can turn the camera just a little bit. Who do we have joining us here?
Yeah, so these are our Bennett wallabies. We have Miss Maple in the front and Ross is behind her, if you can see her. So we have 6 wallabies total in the Australia section. And there they go.
Camera shot.
Yep. But they're really interesting. They're pretty similar to your standard kangaroos. They are marsupials, so they share a lot of the same traits with them. But yeah.
All right, so that's awesome, Haley. So I think before we start to meet some of our classroom and ask some questions, I want to just ask you about a typical day. So when you come in, you obviously work with a lot of bird species. How do you get the cassowaries ready for the day? What do you have to do to work with them?
Yeah, so for cassowaries, so they are big poopers. So there's a whole lot to clean up every day. We'll get their diets ready. We feed them different kinds of fruits and veggies. It might be sweet potato or apples, grapes always for Boris, his favorite. Sometimes watermelon, honeydew, what have you. We also have a grain that kind of fills in the gaps that we can't provide. So it gets them that protein that they need and all of the little bits that, they'd probably find in the wild, but we can't give them. So they do eat like lizards, insects, fish. So we just make sure that they have a balanced diet. And then we come here, we rake, we clean everything. We're observing every inch of their area, making sure that there aren't any holes. We do train our cassowaries. So Boris here is trained using grapes, which are the best training tool ever. We do get weights on them. We get them to stand on a station if we need to. We get them to follow a target stick. And with that, you can do a lot of medical procedures. So that really helps engage us with them. It builds a relationship. With birds, you really do need that keeper bond with them. And then we provide them enrichment. So enrichment is also really, really important. These birds are very, very intelligent. So every day we give them a different sort of a puzzle or a toy that they can play around with. And then we head out to the next bird.
All right, awesome. I think it's time we meet some of our classrooms. So I just want to remind our classrooms who are tuning in via YouTube. Don't forget, you can still get on the action. I'll keep an eye out on YouTube over here. I'll look at the chat sidebar. So send us in some questions. Let us know where you're watching from. We'll give you a shout out. And then to the teachers who are on camera, just a quick reminder, I need you to turn the mics on for me when I call your classroom's name. So let's start off. We're not going to go too far from here. We're going to go to Chesapeake, Virginia. Mrs. Deer's class is hanging out with us. If you want to turn your mic on and say hi, and then go ahead with your question. All right. I don't hear Mrs. Deer's class yet, but I know they were having some internet.
Yep. We're here.
There, let's go, Mrs. Deer's class.
Hey there, we're here. Sorry, I was across the room. Anybody want to ask a question? Okay, here comes our question. You want to get on camera?
Did you have, wait, what? Did you have chicks hatch last year? How many?
So we didn't have any last year. We have only just got US cassowary Bella, and we're hoping that if the meet up goes well with Bella and Boris, we may have some babies in the future. Our other pair, we need to still change up the enclosure that they're in so that it can be chick proof. So last year we didn't have any, but we do have plans for the future to have some if all goes well.
All right, awesome. Good question from our class in Chesapeake. Let's go now to Florida, North Palm Beach. Mr. LeBeau's class should be hanging out with us. If you guys want to turn your mic on, give us a big shout out so we know you can hear us, and then go ahead.
Yes, we can. We can hear you, Joe. Hang on. We got one question. Who's going to ask the question? Somebody? Go ahead.
Why is the cassowary endangered?
Why are they? So just like most animals, humans going into their area is the #1 cause for them to go downhill. These guys rely on really, really thick forests. And as more roads are developed, more businesses are built, those areas tend to get taken away from these guys. So there are a lot of efforts being made for individuals who have property to thicket their property out and make it a kind of a byway for cassowaries to travel through. But the #1 reason currently is habitat loss.
We're taking away their home.
Okay, great question. Let's see, Miss Langer's class in Peterborough, Ontario. If you want to go ahead, turn the mic on so we know you can hear us, give us a big shout out, and then let's take a quick question.
Hello, can you hear us? We're actually in Cobourg, Ontario, right on Lake.
All right.
So Lily has a question. How long? So here, just talk here, stand here.
How long can one of those birds live in captivity and in the wild?
So do they live longer in captivity or in the wild, and how long do they live for?
Yes. In the wild, they don't live as long. Over here in captivity, they have free vet care. We make sure that they get the right amount of food every day. We make sure that they're living happy lives the best way they can. So in captivity, they can live up to 60 years, whereas in the wild, maybe only 40. But they're pretty long-lived animals.
Perfect. Awesome question. Class hanging out with us in Toronto, Ontario. If you want to turn your mic on, give us a big shout out so we know you're ready, and then go ahead.
Hi there, guys.
Good morning.
Good morning. So we have lots of questions, but we have one student here.
Okay, so I remember in the beginning that you said that their wattles can change by their mood. So like, how does it change? Like, how does that work?
It's really, really a minor change, but it'll just get more red or more blue depending on the mood. I'm not too sure what dictates the mood, but it might be that they're more stimulated, so they might be angry, and it just flashes a little bit more red. But it's a really subtle difference. They do have a different field of vision than we do. They can see in infrared, so that might have something to do with it too. But they can change it just very, very subtly depending on the passion that they have in that moment.
All right, great question. So I just stepped off camera just for a moment. I wanted to take a look at our YouTube feed. So we have a ton of classrooms joining us live on YouTube. So I want to give some shout outs to grade 7s, Crystal Springs, Massachusetts. We've got some other students in Royal Oaks Elementary in North Carolina hanging out with us. We've got more schools in Lee County, Virginia hanging out with us. Lots of great classrooms. Mr. Okudo's grade 5 class are hanging out in St. John, Guelph. We've got classrooms in Scarborough, Pennington Gap, Virginia. So lots of Virginia classrooms this morning. St. Mary's Elora. Oh, St. Mary's Elora. I got to pop in for a second. Mrs. Hodgson's class. So good to see you. Finn, how you doing, buddy? I'm looking forward to seeing you tomorrow morning. So that's my son's class, Finn. So that's a grade 2 class that's hanging out with us. So Finn, I'm glad you're able to hang out with Boris today from the zoo. But let's grab one of those live YouTube questions. So let's see. Oh, we're wondering from Mrs. Edwards' class, how old is Boris?
So Boris is about 22 years old. We don't know the exact age, but that's the best guess that we can make. We did get him a long, long time ago. He came from Dallas Zoo, so we can only work on the information that they gave us. But in 2010, he came to us from Dallas, and the estimated age today is 22.
All right, perfect. We'll keep those YouTube questions coming. But for now, let's get another class to turn their microphone on. Mrs. Drazen's class, grade 2s, hanging out in Windsor, Ontario. If you guys want to turn your mic on.
Hello.
Okay. What's your question?
How long can they live?
Oh, excuse me, Aiden. Ella's asking a question.
What time do they breed? Summer, spring, winter, or fall?
So they can, the very earliest time of year for them to breed is April, and it can go all the way up until September, maybe June to September-ish, somewhere around there. At least that's when they lay the eggs, and then the incubation goes from there.
All right, excellent. So Mr. Schlicker's class, we just talked to Mrs. Schlicker. Actually, no, we haven't. So Mrs. Schlicker's class, if you guys want to turn your microphone on, they're in Durham, Connecticut. So turn it on, give us a big shout out.
Do they fight?
There they are, Connecticut.
Do they fight?
So they like to be solitary, which is why we don't really have them living with too many others. So all year long, they're solitary. They're by themselves. They're in their own territories. They only come together to breed, and then they're alone again. So we would not want him to feel like his territory is being encroached on by another individual. So they don't fight, but that's because they're kept separate, and we don't even want to encourage it. So he doesn't fight anyone because he's by himself, but they may fight each other in the wild if they felt threatened. All
right. Awesome questions for our first round. So I'm going to swing back. We've got time for a second round. So let's start off at Mr. LeVog's class. If you guys want to start us off in Florida, turn your mic on and go ahead with the question.
Charlotte? Okay, Charlotte, go ahead.
Do they migrate?
Do they migrate?
So they don't, they have little passages and corridors that they can meander around. The males have a pretty solid territory that they just stay in, but the females kind of wander a little bit more. But they can, the range that they have regardless is pretty small because it's only Australia and New Guinea and they're pretty big birds. So they typically just stay in one area, but they do have the ability to move if they need to.
All right, great question. Just speaking about the pathways, I just wanted to ask about, so I've heard cassowaries referred to as a really important role in the forest, in the rainforest. Dispersing seeds. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so these guys, they don't really have much of a digestive tract. It's maybe a fifth of the size of an emu. So everything that goes in pretty much comes out the same way it came. They can eat up to 238 different species of plant. Most of it's in the fruit and seed of the plant. So it's really important they eat the big old apple or what have you, not in that area, but whatever fruit they can get their mouths on, they eat it, they walk around, and they poop it out without much damage done to the seeds. So they're a cornerstone species for maintaining a diverse vegetative state of the islands.
All right, very cool. So let's get Mrs. Deer's class. If you want to turn your microphone on again in Chesapeake.
Yep, we're getting ready for our second question.
Perfect.
Nice and loud, honey.
What is the typical lifespan?
The typical lifespan?
Mm-hmm.
So between around 40 to 60, depending on if they're in the wild or in captivity. So it's a little bit longer if they're in captivity.
All right, let's see. Where should we go next? Miss Eugenio's class. If you want to turn your microphone on in Toronto, we're ready for another question.
Okay, here we are. Come on in, Maddie.
How does the dad survive if they sitting on the egg without going to the washroom or eating?
So they can pack on the pounds pretty well right before. So we have to, that's one of the reasons why we take weights on them, so we can make sure that we're giving them enough food. And if they're finishing all their food, we can give them more. We always want a little bit left over. So typically if dad knows that mom is going to lay pretty soon, he'll just eat a heck of a lot more, put some weight on, and it's just enough weight to take him through that period. And they're just designed to do it so their body uses up less energy during that time. They're not really moving too much, so they wouldn't use up as much of their storages. But yeah, they're a pretty impressive bird that they can survive that.
Awesome. Grayson's class, do you want to turn your microphone on? We're ready for a follow-up. There they are.
Do they live anywhere else than Australia?
They live in the wild in Australia and New Guinea, and then the captive ones live all over the world in zoos or sanctuaries. So you can find them in a bunch of places, but their native areas are Australia and New Guinea.
All right, so I just ducked off to grab another YouTube question. We've got a question from a class, and they're wondering, you're using grapes right now with Boris, but does he have another favorite food, or is grapes, is that it for him?
So he loves grapes, loves grapes. That's what we use to train him, so it's definitely his favorite. He likes really sugary things, so he, just like most humans, prefers to have the sugary sweet fruit versus the boring vegetables that we give him. So he usually doesn't eat a sweet potato and those like plain Jane fruits, but watermelon is delicious. He likes apples, honeydew, pretty much the sweeter the better for him. Sometimes we give them blackberries, which is fun, but yeah, sweet stuff is always the best.
All right, perfect. Mrs. Schlicker's class, if you want to turn your microphone again, we'll steal another question.
Okay. All right, go ahead, Sophia. Come on up. Right up here, nice and loud, okay?
Are they in danger?
So they're vulnerable. They're going pretty downhill in certain areas, just more pocketed, but in general, they're considered vulnerable. So not all the way endangered yet, but getting that way.
All right. And then let's get Mrs. Langer's group in Coburg. If you guys want to turn your microphone on, we're ready for another one.
Are there most of these species of bird raised in a zoo, or do they come to you from the wild for health reasons?
So was that question, were they born in the wild, or I'm sorry, I couldn't hear that question.
Raised in a zoo.
Were they born in, like, is that bird, is it born in the zoo? Like most of those birds born in the zoo, or did they come to you because they were at risk in the wild, or they were sick, or?
So he came from a private individual. So I assume, and this was way back when, I assume that he was born in captivity. All of the other ones that we have were all born in captivity, born in like large areas to maintain the population. So we don't have any that were born in the wild.
All right. Absolutely.
Thank you.
Question, awesome question. So another shout out to the YouTube community. Don't forget to keep those questions coming in because we do have a little bit of extra time. But I want to ask you just a quick question. I spent a little time in Cape Tribulation in Queensland or Australia, and I was lucky enough to see some cassowaries, and I saw some cassowaries with some males with the young. And can you tell us a little bit about their feather patterns when they're growing up? We've got this really beautiful kind of brown striping when they're young.
Yeah, so they look kind of similar to like emu babies. And it just helps them kind of blend in. So if you think the forest is all green up top and all brown at the bottom, it helps those babies kind of blend in and hide away from any potential predators. There are a few predators that they have, like crocodiles and dingoes. So it helps when dad is really bright in colors that might warn predators don't come at me. But the babies are a little more drab, so they can kind of blend in with the vegetation, the trees, the leaves. So predators only see this big hulking dad, and they may not even see the babies. The babies do remain pretty close to the dad too, so it's kind of just a combination of blending in and standing out with that family dynamic.
All right, very cool. So I think we might even have time to do another spin through. So let's see if we can do a lightning round of questions and get to each of our camera classrooms one more time. So let's mix it up this time. Let's go back to Mrs. Schlicker's group in Connecticut and see if they have another question for us.
Okay, hold on one second. Come on up.
The teachers work hard today, up and down, on and off.
All right, nice and loud. Oh no, Henry, sit down. Oh, are they what? We might have forgotten our question. What's another one? Tyler, go ahead. Sorry, we're coming.
Okay.
Natural predator.
Could you tell us more about here as
Predators, I can't remember all of them off the top of my head, but the main ones are like crocodiles and dingoes. Crocodiles, because these guys do actually swim pretty well. So that, which is surprising. You wouldn't imagine such a big bird with no wings, well, with very small wings, could do that. And right now they're being hit by a lot of human cars. So we're not really a predator, but we don't help that population at all with that aspect. The Aborigines, though, used to eat them. So, but we don't nowadays.
All right. Mrs. Drazen's class, if you want to turn your mic on one more time, we'll steal another question.
How tough are the eggs?
Pretty tough. They can go through quite a lot. So if you imagine a female who can be up to 6.5 feet tall, just plops them down. They can roll, they can go. She doesn't really keep track of them. And then the dad has to kind of find them. They are designed to withstand like a whole lot. So they're pretty hard, pretty tough. And
do they only have one? Another question about the eggs was, do they only have one a year, or can they have multiple eggs a year, or
No.
multiple clutches? You know.
They typically have 3 to 5. So it's very unusual for them just to have one.
And would that be, is there kind of one?
So birds are pretty interesting as long as it's within the same season and the female still has those hormones going. If, say, we were to take away the eggs early on in the season, but she hasn't finished laying, she'll reclutch. So she'll start her clutch, which is what the name for a group of eggs. She'll start that clutch all over. So for us, it's really important because that's a lot of hormones going through to make an egg. It's important for us to let her lay all the eggs that she wants to lay, even if they're infertile, so that she doesn't feel the need to lay more. That also takes calcium away from her body every time she lays an egg. So we let her just lay them, but in the wild, they would only do one clutch, but we do have the ability to get more out.
All right. Mr. Laveau's class, if you want to turn your mic on, we're ready for another question.
Okay, great. Hang on one second. We already have somebody picked out. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Do baby cassowaries stay with their mom or dad? And if they do, how long?
So they stay with the dad. Mom, after she lays the egg, just leaves and doesn't come back. So they never meet their mom. So they stay with dad the whole time. He raises them for about 6 to 8 months or 6 to 9 months. And then he, at that point, they've learned enough of how to be a cassowary that they don't need dad and they find their own territories and live on their own.
All right. Let's see. Mrs. Langer's class, if you want to ask another question, go ahead with your mic.
Hello, I'm Emma, and I was wondering, do the birds have sharp teeth?
And how do they eat?
And how do they?
And how, sorry, do they have sharp teeth and how do they what?
Eat.
Eat. So
If if they don't have teeth, how do they eat?
Oh, I'm so okay. So they eat by just grabbing whatever they want and throwing them back. So if you look closely, when I give Boris a full grape, which I haven't yet, I'll wait for the camera.
Watch, guys.
So you can see that he'll grab it and throw it back, and he'll just swallow it whole. So I don't know if you saw that or not. I can try one more time.
Say yes, Emma. Yes, we
So
saw it.
They just throw it back. They're really, really good. They know exactly how they eat.
Thank
All
you.
right. Okay. Well, first, I want to say, classrooms, thank you so much for tuning into our first event today. You guys were great. Your questions were awesome as always. Shout out to the YouTube classroom, Spins class hanging out with us from Elora, Ontario. I want to give a shout out to Boris. Boris was pretty darn cooperative today, hanging out with us and showing off some of his skills. And obviously a huge thank you to you for joining us today and sharing some awesome knowledge with us. Where are you off to next?
Well, it's the beginning of the day, so we have a whole lot of animals to tend to. We're gonna finish hanging out with our wallabies and our emus, maybe put some trainings in, and then head off to every other bird we have in the zoo.
Awesome. So we're heading to the bison next. You can see us there at 10, before the orangutans at 11. So we have lots of stuff coming to the Virginia Zoo live today. Last thing we'll do, because I think Boris would enjoy this, boys and girls, teachers, if you can all unmute your microphones right now, let's get really loud and